Do you have any ambition to create games?
I've thought about it a little bit, but to be honest, the reality is I'm not that smart.
Hello and welcome back to another episode of the Cardboard Herald, my chance to talk with creative gamers and game creators. And joining me today is the co-host and co-founder of the Board Games Hot Takes podcast. This is Tim Dolloff. Welcome back to the show. Kind of back to the show. We'll get into it.
Thanks, Jack. Thanks for having me again.
Yeah. We had some technical difficulties. They were on my part. Some things fell apart. We tried arranging this earlier. Things got screwy, things got haywire, but now we're back to record another discussion, a delightful discussion with another podcast host.
You're in luck in that I have a terrible memory, so whatever we talked about before, I have no memory of it. You can ask me the same questions, different questions. It'll be fresh for me.
Okay, excellent. I think we got deep into Dune lore, and then I think there was some hijinks about running in your climate versus my climate, but I like keeping it fresh. So why don't you tell me, what's new in the world of board game hot takes? What's fresh on your mind? What have you been getting to the table lately?
So let's see. This week, I just got Frosthaven in the mail, so that was fun.
Exciting.
Got a chance to unbox it and sort everything, and I talked a little bit about that on our last episode. Otherwise, we played Endless Winter this last week. That was our last episode that came out, and that was a surprise for me. I thought I was going to find it too bloated, too clunky. It was pretty streamlined, surprisingly. And we just got a little oldie but goodie back to the table this week, and that was Dungeon Pets, and that's what our next episode's going to be on. So, variety of stuff.
Oldie but goodie, I like that. And Dungeon Pets certainly is a classic, one that I'd like to see more people play. And that's something that I think about a lot in our hobby, is that we move on into these new hotnesses, or I guess chillnesses, coolnesses with Frosthaven, but we pass by all of these games that are incredible games that are foundational to our hobby, but they don't get talked about because of the zeitgeist and everything. We don't really have a Criterion collection of board games. Someone should really start that at some point. But when you're reflecting on the games that you most want to play, do you find yourself in a position where you are constantly feeling obligated to newer games, or do you find that you get a lot of time with the classics as well?
Yeah, no, it's a blend for me. I'm not at all committed to new hotness. And you can see that, our channel, we release usually a recording about a specific game every week. And we have a pretty good mix. And I'd say we even lean more towards classics, things that were released prior to the current year, than we do brand new games. And part of that is just because it's the games we want to play. We love the hobby. We love exploring all these games. There's so many great games out here. And, we don't need to be trying every new game that comes out. We want to try the ones that people have been talking about for years. And then once in a while, a new one's going to catch our attention and we get excited about it. And so then we'll try to get to that to the table soon. But we just recorded our top games we want to play list for this year. And we do this every year since we started the podcast 3 years ago. And I would say probably 30, maybe 3 out of 5 games that each of us had on our list were probably 5 years old or older. So, we're still trying to find all those classics we haven't had a chance to play yet, explore them. And some of my favorite games of all time were not new.
And you rely on playing things on Tabletop Simulator a lot. That's where you go to for a lot of your gaming for the podcast, right?
It's a mix, but mostly online platforms. Since my co-hosts were all located geographically in different locations, Tabletop Simulator is where we can find almost any game. We prefer Board Game Arena, and there's a lot of great stuff out there. I mean, we've been hitting Anachrony hard. It's in alpha right now.
Right.
Recently, what a great game to have on there. So it's always great when we can find awesome games on Board Game Arena, and there's a ton out there, a ton of great stuff I still haven't played yet. So that's our go-to, but you're not going to find everything there. So Tabletop Simulator, Tabletopia, Yucata, any platform that a great game's on, we'll search it out.
Was there ever any trepidation that you had at first, you were going to somehow compromise the gaming experience by playing on a virtual platform? I know you're a Magic the Gathering guy, and so a lot of people who dip their toes into the world of tabletop gaming with Magic kind of got that transition by switching to online Magic. But there are certainly a lot of board gamers out there who are the physical experience is what I'm actually looking for, and they are still resistant towards virtual implementations.
Yeah, I mean, that's That's a great question. The reality is we don't have that option. So
Yeah,
when we started this podcast, it was right after COVID, kind of hit us. We all decided, let's be safe, and we stopped gaming together in person. And this is three friends that were hanging out almost every week. Started doing it online, and we're like, hey, we're doing this online. Let's go ahead and start talking about it online afterwards. And then we all moved to separate places. So, COVID kind of split us up, and we made use of it, and this is where we are today. So, it's, of course, it's not ideal, like 100%. Like we talk about that every time, about how many plays we had, what platform we played it on. And we talk about what we know and don't know about the components. And there's, of course, an element to that. At the end of every episode, of course, we also cover, games that have been on our table. And this is usually each of us independently talking about the games we've locally been playing. And so we can get into the context of the feel of a game and stuff like that. And many of the games that we review as well, one or more of us have at least played it physically in the past, not always. So we try to, talk about that, but we just try to be honest about it. But sure, absolutely. Like somebody asked a poll question on Twitter today, what's your preferred gaming platform? Is it in person? Is it online? And I said 100% in person, even though probably 50% of my gaming is online, whether it's async on Board Game Arena or it's with my friends to record the podcast every week. Gaming in person is my ideal. It's what I want to be doing. But I've been doing it long enough as well. I mean, a 20-year Magic the Gathering player, as you mentioned, now 5 or 6 years in the board gaming hobby. I have a pretty good sense for what translates to a digital platform and what's missing there. And I think we can talk about that to some extent.
Well, your physical collection has just doubled in weight, I'm sure, with the arrival of Frosthaven. Tell me about your actual gaming group that you can play physical games with. Is Frosthaven one of these games that you're going to find the players to play with? Is this, something you'll play with your partner? Is this something that you'll solo? How are you going to get this game to the table? Because it's no easy task just to get that thing started.
Yeah, that's a great question, Jack, and I don't know, to be honest. When I bought Frosthaven 2.5 years ago or 3 years ago, I honestly bought it expecting to solo it primarily.
Right.
And I bought it when I was still in my old my old town with my friends, thought maybe we could get it played, but I was really expecting to solo it. And then we all separated and moved away. Now I got a chance to play Gloomhaven Jaws of the Lion, and I soloed that. And I had a decent amount of fun with it. But for me, the way to do it is going to be playing 2 or more characters. And I found it a little bit too heavy for me to enjoy as a solo experience. So I don't want to solo Frosthaven. And I actually tried to give it away on our show, and it took so long. I gave it away to somebody, and then it took so long to arrive. I ended up feeling bad, and I gave them a gift card. They asked for that instead of waiting for forever. But now I've got it. I'm kind of excited about it. So I've been here where I live now in Phoenix for like 2.5 years, started to put together a couple different game groups. And what I plan to do over the next couple of weeks is basically just talk to some of my local gamers about it and ask if they're interested. And if I can get a 3 or 4 person group together that'll get together once a week or every couple of weeks to do this, that's my hope. If not, it may not stick around. Maybe I'll try a couple solo games of it and then move it on. But I am hoping to get a local group together. I just don't have them picked out yet.
So you talked about the origins of Board Game Hot Takes as a podcast, and then that happened during COVID, and you guys split up, and now you're doing things primarily virtually. How have your tastes as a gamer evolved since doing the podcast? Because I'm certain your exposure to games and also critically thinking about those games kind of changes how you view what you were interested in, what you most want out of games, what you certainly don't like. How do you feel about, that evolution over the last few years?
Yeah, that's absolutely true. Now, I would say it hasn't changed drastically, and I'll try to speak for myself and my co-host a little bit, is that I was always kind of a Euro gamer, mechanism focused. I got introduced to a game that had cool mechanisms, and I was like, wow, this is great. And so that's where I was really focused. And I was never a big fan of high interaction, believe it or not, as a Magic player, but that's a little different. I could go into a long diatribe about why a 2-person one-on-one head-to-head game is different than a multiplayer game.
This is a podcast, my friend. If there is ever room for a long diatribe, it is this.
And generally, though, I haven't loved the scenario of like area control games, high conflict, King of the Hill, that type of thing. It's just, not my favorite. But my friends, on the other hand, love that stuff. They love the interaction. They love that type of They love, they love player interaction in a way that Euros often don't give you. And I think we've all shifted a little bit more to the center of that whole conversation over 3 years of playing a unique game every week and many, many other games outside of those. What I have found is that even though I still love these mechanisms, I still love Euro style games, I still love my multiplayer solitaire games, I also know that the most fun that I ever have at a table with people is when there is some kind of interaction. It doesn't have to be mean necessarily, but it has to be a way to have an impact on the other games, to care what other people are playing. And sometimes the most fun games are even, lighter games. They're almost party style games. And I've taken to accept that and find more fun in those, but I still love my heavy Euro. So I would say it hasn't shifted drastically. What I have found though is just like anything, when you get exposure to a lot of something, you start to get a little bit more picky. You start to identify what's better, what's been done better before, what is this doing better than before, what's unique about this. And so I definitely am not as I don't know, as gracious about how every game is an amazing game. Yeah. Right? There's a lot of games that I'm like, I wish I was playing something else. And so, that just happens though. I think anytime you really get deep into a hobby, and it doesn't matter what it is.
Right. Now, I wonder if this is something that's more common towards people who are in the content creating space, the people who are putting on conventions, the people who are really trying to share their love of gaming with the masses, that a lot of the love for games comes out of the experience of having other people fall in love with games. Like, I find that a lot of the games that I love most at this point are not just the games that I know that I can get played, but I'm kind of like ambivalent to experiences so long as the people that I'm playing with are having a great time. That's not to say that there aren't things that I love or dislike in a game, but I know that it's going to seriously weight a game in the favor of me enjoying it if I'm sitting there and like my kid loves it, or my wife is absolutely into it, or my best buddy is sitting over here and he's like, oh dude, I didn't get Root before, but suddenly I get Root, and then I'm like, I know, right? Now all I want to do is play more Root. Do you find that, like that was part of the instinct for you to dive deeper in the hobby, is not just you getting to play games, but shepherding other people into gaming?
Yeah, I think that's always been some truth. I mean, when I really got heavy into gaming to start with, I knew a couple people that were in it and they kind of brought me into it. And then I immediately was like, we need more of this. And I put together a game group, and I mostly just brought in friends, people that had they had no knowledge of the board game hobby at all. And I was just like, hey, Tuesday night, come over to my house. I'm going to teach you a game. Let's try it. And it was so fun when you start to see those people. In fact, this just happened with my neighbor down the street who I introduced to some games recently, where you can see them just start to get excited and enthusiastic about this. And that obviously is great, but then it's going to lead you toward the games that are going to make them happy. And it's kind of like, like you introduce it, you're like, oh, this is the best movie I've ever seen. You tell a friend that, and you really want them to love it. You want to watch it with them, and you want them to be laughing at all the right points. And it's kind of like a board game is the same way. So I do really try to pick games that I think the audience I'm playing with are going to have fun with and are going to like.
Right.
And my two most regular, the people I play with the most are my wife and our really close friend, Jen, who spends a lot of time with us. Her kids are about my kids' age, and we spend a lot of time together. And they love gaming. We game every time we get together, usually a few times a week. And they have a little bit different tastes in the games that they love. So we play the games that they love because I want them to be having fun, and I'm glad people are playing games with me. But it doesn't mean that 100% of the time I'm going to want to play the games that they want to play, or the exact game that they want to play. So, you still have to, you have to take care of yourself a little bit. You have to be a little selfish once in a while and say, I don't feel like playing that game again for the 100th time. Can we try something different tonight? And if I didn't do that, right, they don't want to learn new games. They love the games they love. But if I never did that, they would have never been exposed to some of their favorite games, because I was like, wait, let's try something different tonight. I know you're going to groan about it, but once they got through it, they loved it. So, it's a little bit of a push and pull, but I think it's good for everybody for everyone to get a little bit of happiness out of it.
It's a unique hobby. I mean, compared to other hobbies, you have a vested interest in converting new people to gaming, because to get the best experience out of most of the games. I mean, solo gaming is better than it's ever been, but the generally accepted best experience that you're going to have with most games is with other players. And so, unlike telling someone about like, hey, check out this movie. Well, I mean, that doesn't mean that I want to watch every movie with you. I need to hook you as a gamer. So that way I have someone who can sit down and play games with me. So we kind of proselytize. It was so funny, you talking about your neighbor, or, talking about, these friends who had never played games before and had very little concept of it. That's kind of what we do, right? We just kind of grab the nearest person where we're like, your opinion on gaming hasn't been formed yet, so I'm going to blow your mind. Like, coworkers in social service, these like child protection service workers who I'm like, hey, you want to play a board game at lunch? Or, like going over to someone at the coffee shop, or, like any gathering that I can get to with my friends' or my kids' friends' parents or something, be like, oh yeah, I thought I'd break out this game. It's called Sprawlopolis. It's only 18 cards, but you might like it. We just find opportunities to try to get these people to play games with us, but it's what we need to do. But I want to go way back. Like, I'm talking way back, because you said 20 years of Magic playing. When's the first time that you recall having a game interest you as like a hobby unto itself? Something where you're like, oh, I want more of this.
Well, when I was a young kid, so I grew up in kind of a gaming family, traditional though,
Totally.
Traditional board games, the stuff everybody's played. And I always liked games. It's always something that was fun to us. But I had a brother that was about a year and a half older than me. And so, of course, we were into everything together. And we got exposed to the concept of Dungeons & Dragons. Now, we never owned any Dungeons & Dragons materials, but we started creating our own characters. And we started making up our own stories about what to do. We didn't know how the mechanisms worked, but we kind of gleaned from hearing about it, how it might work. And, it was way even back then where we were just like, we need more of this. Like, we need more ways to create, we started turning everything into a game. We had Garbage Pail Kids, and we turned it into a war style game. We had, like everything was a game. Stratego was something that hit for us for a long time. Mm-hmm. So, those were some early ones, but, Magic the Gathering is the one that really took over my whole mindset about what I wanted to be spending my free time doing. And I got introduced to that when I was, 19 years old, 1996 probably, shortly after high school. And my brother taught it to me, and I immediately got hooked. And it's like, it's all I wanted to do for 20 years until I discovered hobby board games, to be honest, which I feel like has kind of deepened my love for what you can do on a tabletop, just because of the variety, the unique experiences you can get out of it. But yeah, I would say Magic is kind of the one that really grappled me in, but it's been there since I was a little kid.
Do you still dip your toes into Magic?
I love Magic, but I don't have anyone local that plays with me. I still have a cube. I have an 8-person cube of some of my favorite cards of all time that I'm just waiting for someone to say, like, hey, you want to play Magic? And yeah, we'll do a Winchester draft, or we'll get a few people. I don't know. Maybe it'll happen someday. I have a couple friends that will visit occasionally that I used to play Magic with, so we'll bust that out once in a while. But that's about it. I know that if I get into the arena world, I will not stop, and I just don't have that kind of time. So I haven't dug into Magic Arena. Probably will get tempted one of these days and go deep, but not too much anymore.
Do you have a favorite Magic card?
Oh boy, I haven't thought about that for a long time, so I'm going to say no.
Okay.
I'm going to say no. I could probably tell you I've got a favorite set.
Okay, what's your favorite
set? Because it's Invasion.
Okay.
It was the first multicolor set, and it was the first time I ever went and got into the tournament scene of Magic. Mm-hmm. And I just remember the love of that experience of going to pre-releases and then going into booster drafts, and that's kind of where I really got into competitive Magic, got into sealed and limited Magic in a significant way.
Right.
And it was just a fun set to do it with.
Yeah, when I think about my favorite Magic card, this is ridiculous because every Magic player is going to roll their eyes at this, but it came in at a very formative time in my life where I was just discovering fantasy. Like, I had been recently exposed to the 1977 Hobbit cartoon film, and that was so outside of the scope of anything that was in my household. It was actually my uncle who kind of like corrupted me. He had it on VHS, and totally not my dad's style whatsoever. And I was like, oh my God, I want more of this. And shortly after, Magic kind of stepped into my life, and myself and my older brother got into it. And I remember that we had some cards from prior sets, and it was right around the era of Revised, maybe into 4th edition, and then Ice Age. But specifically, I can remember Herloon Minotaur, which I have a signed print on my wall that shows up in a lot of videos, and people are like, oh, Herloon Minotaur. And Sengir Vampire, which kind of like blew my mind because I was like, I'm young, but I'm pretty sure there's something both grotesque and sexual about this card. And the one that made the most impression on me was Mon's Goblin Raiders, a 1/1 for 1 mana. What's impressive about that? First off, the artwork, nothing looks like Mon's Goblin Raiders in contemporary fantasy, like the things that were coming out at that time. It was just a weird illustration. And it was an apostrophe S. And they filled that flavor text to the brim. Who is Mon? And why does he have Goblin Raiders? Are these Goblin Raiders? Why do they kind of look like Khan from Star Trek? I mean, like, it was so perplexing, but my mind could not stop thinking about Mon and his Goblin Raiders and who this was in the context of Dominaria. And then suddenly I'm like, what is Dominaria? And it totally pulled me in. Every card pack, the first thing I would do before I even looked at any of the mechanics, because I knew my brother was going to beat me. He's 4.5 years older than me, so he just used me as a punching bag. I'd still play the game for sure. But every pack that I opened for the first 2 years of playing Magic, I would look at the flavor text first because I wanted to know what was going on. And then suddenly this Ice Age was happening in the same world. And who's Lim Dole, the sorcerer, and all these things. But I think that all started with Mon's Goblin Raiders and realizing that there's some implication here. And for that amount of thematic resonance to come out of some stupid 1/1 for 1 mana is brilliant. And the sets continue to evoke all of these really deeply thematic concepts with quite abstract terms. I mean, the game is a very abstract game when you get right down to it, but somehow they're able to convey so much with these cards. So Mon's Goblin Raiders for me, that's a story that I haven't even thought about in a while.
Yeah, it's amazing how well they've managed to keep that going for so long. And I know Wizards of the Coast has made some missteps this last year. With multiple properties, Magic being one of them. I haven't been following it too much, but just the amount of effort that they put into the art direction, into the world building, into the mechanisms, and making that game stay alive and thrive for, I don't know, we're coming up on 30 years now at this point. It's impressive. And you have to, I think every, modern board game designer should play Magic if they have, and most of them probably have. You should be following Mark Rosewater's design, blog, if he's still putting it out. He was for a long time. I don't know if he still totally is, but I learned, it taught me a lot about the way I think about not only game mechanisms and what's interesting or unique about game mechanisms, but about what's good strategy. Even the way you weight, how you value things has carried through from my Magic days and through learning about the design of Magic into even modern games.
Did you ever read like Duelist or Inquest? I'm trying to remember the specific magazine that would have the setups for like, here's the situation, you have 4 life left, this is what's tapped and this is untapped, and you have to be able to do X, Y, and Z. I loved
I think it was
those.
The Duelist.
Yeah.
Totally. These puzzles, right?
Exactly. But I think that's more than anything what taught me, because again, I was young getting into Magic. What taught me to think about like every action as a resource, and that carried over into playing strategic board games, which, not to say that I'm like some phenomenal player or anything, but it gave me a much deeper appreciation for how you're supposed to contextualize every single interaction that you have with the game as a potential resource that you can spend. Which I guess brings me to the next stage in the story. You're playing Magic for 20 years, and then someone is like, hey, you like Magic? Let me show you this thing. What's the game that kind of blew your mind and just overturned your pre-existing notion of what board games were.
Yeah, it was a little more complicated than that, but I was introduced to some modern board games through the years while playing Magic. I played Carcassonne and Catan and a handful of other Battlestar Galactica, and enjoyed all those plays. But my mind was, my heart was always with Magic, so I didn't really get too moved into them. And then I moved to a new city, didn't really have anyone local that was playing, so I was still thinking about Magic but not playing it a lot. And my wife met some people and said, hey, these guys, this couple's into board games. Do you want to have them over for a game night? I'm like, absolutely, we got to do this. And they brought over, and this is a current modern gamer. If you walked into their house, they had Calyx shelves with 300 games on them, more games than I even knew existed. But they walked in with Agricola. And Agricola was the first game we played, which in my mind is a heavier game than I would typically introduce to somebody for the first time on a game night. They brought it in and had a wonderful time with it. It was tight. It was hard. Every decision mattered. And I got introduced to worker placement for the first time. Absolutely loved it. And so, yeah, I guess I have to kind of credit Agricola, but I think I would have been caught in no matter what it was. And every game that it was me then after that, like, hey, we played 3 games tonight. What are we playing next week? And it's like, I just wanted to keep it going immediately. So, but I think it could have been anything.
It could have been anything. So with Agricola, one of the things that I look out for in that game is that it is so punitive. Like, did you have any sort of friction with your first experience? Like, or did you, see the possibility? Like, it's very tenuous to introduce someone to that game. Not because I think it's overly complex. I actually think a lot about the game is intuitive. However, if you aren't able to do it well, then it will punish the hell out of you.
I remember it feeling hard, to do that, but I won that night, so that probably helped a lot.
Yeah.
But my wife enjoyed it too, and
right.
she didn't, and we were all worried about the hunger tokens or whatever they are, right? And so it was a challenging first play, and what I remember to be more complicated to get into, and why I think it's a little heavy, is when you got those occupation and the the improvement cards, there's just so much that people have to take in on a first play.
Oh, yeah.
And if I remember right, I don't think we drafted. He just handed us 7 of each. So you got 14 cards in your hand, and you're like, what am I going to do with all this stuff? And you end up only playing 2 or 3 of them. So that I remember feeling like this is a whole lot of information for not a lot of payoff. Of course, that's my favorite part of the game now, but back then it felt like way more than you want to introduce somebody to on a first play.
Have you played Agricola solo?
I tried it one time and didn't enjoy it very much.
Yeah.
But I have played it.
So I tried it one time and didn't enjoy it very much until I played the campaign mode,
nice.
which I don't know if it was introduced in the revised edition or not, but it recontextualized Agricola for me as a solo game, because generally I don't like solo games where it's like, get a certain number of points, and you're like, okay, well, that's kind of lame. You got X points, and that doesn't mean you won. You just did better than the lower tier that you could have gotten. But in the campaign mode, you have to meet a certain point threshold, and you get to save one of your occupations, which becomes persistent in the next game. And then the point total that you have to meet each game ratchets up.
Nice.
And having that sense of investment that you might play a card that would be suboptimal this game, or go out of your way to set yourself up with something just so you can make sure that that's part of your loadout pre-existing at the beginning of the next game, was something that I was like, suddenly Agricola solo actually matters to me. I haven't had much chance to talk to people about it, so it was an opportunity.
I like that. That sounds super fun, and I should get into it. But interestingly, my relationship with solo games has been changing as well.
Yeah.
When I got into solo games, I think it was mainly just in an absence of other players, right? I was getting into this hobby. I'm buying games, but maybe I'm getting a game played once a week, but I've got all these great games I want to try. And so I started getting him into solo just for the opportunity to get him to the table, which was great. And it was a fun way to explore them. I still like the solo game, but my choice on solo games has shifted a little bit. I tend to go towards something that's either storytelling, like I recently discovered Arkham Horror LCG.
Oh yeah,
absolutely love it.
Yeah,
and that's fun, or at least something that's a little bit shorter and quicker. Things like Under Falling Skies, things like trying to think, like Paperback Adventures is a game that I've been just absolutely loving solo lately. The heavier Euro games, I'm tending to not go to solo anymore, just because I don't know. I feel like I like the experience more playing with real people and the competition against
Absolutely.
real people. I like a campaign experience though, so the idea of bringing out Agricola like that, it's tempting. I might have to give it a shot.
You might give it a shot, and plus it plays pretty quickly. Like
Yeah.
especially if it's something that you could knock out a couple of games in maybe an hour and a half or something like that. Especially if you know what you're doing. But okay, so you get into the hobby. Eventually, you get to the podcast, which is where you're at now. Like, what are the goals for the future? Like, what do you expect out of this podcast? Are you trying to make this a full-time job? Is this purely hobby? Like, do you want to evolve into different avenues? Like, what are the ambitions for the future?
I don't know how to answer that, to be honest, and I think about it a lot. When we started the podcast, my goal primarily was to have the opportunity to get to know some of the people that I was interacting with, not really, but watching in the board game world. People like yourself, other content creators,
Right.
Board game designers, board game,
Yeah.
reviewers, and things like that. And so that was kind of one of my goals, and it's paid off. It's been great. I've built a fun community of other content creators. I've gotten to have interactions with and chats with game designers that almost feel like celebrities to me, and that's super fun. I know you have as well, obviously, because you interview quite a few people. So yeah, we accomplished that goal, and we far exceeded what my goal was for how many listeners we could get to a podcast. I didn't really know what to expect, but we far exceeded that. And right now, it just feels like it's something I'm having fun doing, and it's fun to continue to try to grow it. And that's kind of my ambition right now. It's I'm lobbying our listeners to get us a Golden Geek nomination this year. Is it going to happen? Probably not. But boy, that would be so exciting, because I've been voting for the Golden Geek nominations for podcasts for 6 or 7 years now. Wouldn't it be so cool to be one of the people that were nominated?
I'd vote for you, certainly.
Thank you. Well, so anyway, that's kind of my ambition right now, is just continue growing it, keep making something that people are enjoying. It's so fun to have a community, and we really do. Like, we've got a community of people that know each other now, that interact with each other because they met through our social media channels, or because they met talking about our show, and that's a blast. And we've made a lot of friends, both people who were listeners and have become friends, other content creators that we got a chance to collaborate with or interact with. So that's all been awesome. And I don't know. There's definitely no ambition to turn this into a job. In fact, I appreciate one of the things that I feel like we do really well is we can just keep this fun, and we're never going after the money. We're not monetizing. We're not even asking for review copies, although we do occasionally get some that we accept. We just want to keep talking about board games and have other people. And the fact that people want to listen is just, it blows my mind.
Do you have any ambition to create games?
I've thought about it a little bit, but to be honest, the reality is I'm not that smart. And so I've done some prototypes in the past, and I realized that they were terrible. And I assume most prototypes are at first, and they need a lot of work. And then I realized I could be playing these other great games that smarter and better designers have already put together. So I don't think so. It's something I think maybe, I would like to retire early at some point. That's one of my goals for my life. And if I'm able to do that, or at least move to a little bit lighter career at some point, and I just have more free time, then maybe it's something I'd like to dabble around with or play around with right now. But right now I have so little leisure time that I want to spend it just playing the games that I love instead of trying to make bad games that other people don't want to play.
Do you ever find yourself, kind of evaluating your hobby? You're talking about having so little leisure time. It's cool to be a content creator. I like being a content creator, and I'm not trying to do this as a full-time job, but I'm cognizant of setting up obligations onto my social time, my free time, and also the people that I most want to spend time with. Like, by reviewing games with physical games, then I'm going to have to find people to play games with, and then the frequent thing to get to my table, whether it's with my friends, with my wife, or with my son, it's like, here's a new game we got to learn. we got to review this. I got to get it to the table. I got to have something to talk about. And for the most part, everyone's really good sports about that. And then there's the other side of it, which I think a lot of content creators experience, where it can be real anxiety ridden to, just see, well, why did that one get that many clicks as opposed to that one? Like, I put so much effort into this one and I didn't put that much effort into that one. And I think you just kind of got to distance yourself and, take a step back and not worry about that. Don't compare yourself to other people. Just focus on evaluating, are you having fun? Are you doing the thing that you're proud of? And not really thinking about the feedback loop and over analyzing things. But, like, if you have such little leisure time, do you find yourself evaluating, like, am I putting more pressure on myself through my hobbies?
Yeah, all the time. But I have pretty strict boundaries, and I think the way we formatted the podcast was intentional. It was very intentional because we're all, three people with pretty weighty careers, and we knew we had a limited amount of time around our families and our jobs and stuff like that. So when we made the podcast, we specifically made it to say we're not going to devote a lot of time each week.
Right.
The podcast is, we want to play a game every week anyway. Let's just get on the show and talk about that game after we play it every week.
It's a good way to be.
And so of course we're not going to get that in-depth review of like 15 plays and I can tell you whether the game's going to last. Like, that's not who we are. That's not what our show does. But it's important because if we were trying to be that, I think we all would have gotten burnt out and we would not be doing this still. Mm-hmm. So we recognized what our boundaries were and we set that. Now, we've kind of pushed those boundaries a couple times and found that it didn't work for us. For example, we started trying to get people onto our show interviews to what you do. And we found that tended to be more work, more anxiety for us,
right.
Get the prep work. And even though it was great and it was cool to talk to other content creators on our show and to have them on, and I love doing it. Like, I love being on your show. I love talking with other content creators on their shows. That's kind of my thing. Chris and Adam don't have any interest in doing it, but on our show, it made it more work for us. And so we took a step back from that. And then a couple times we reached out and started to reach out to publishers and saying like, hey, if you have, we like your games generally, do you want to start sending us review copies? And then the obligation comes when you get review copies. Right. And so that all of a sudden you're like, man, I don't really feel like playing this tonight, or I don't feel like talking about this game tonight because there's something else I'm more excited about. And all that obligation is just not necessary. So we've mostly pushed that away, and we almost always reject any review copies. We never ask for them. The rare cases being a game that we know that we're super excited about. And if a publisher happens to reach out and say, you want to play this game and we're excited about it, then we'll take it, because it gives us an opportunity usually to talk about it earlier. And so that, but just we're trying to just keep those obligations out of our life so it doesn't become a job. It still is sometimes, right? Like every week we still are trying to talk about a new game. And so oftentimes every week we're like, man, I got a busy week, but I've got to spend 2 hours learning this new game on Monday night so I can be ready to play it on Tuesday night and talk about it, right? So it's still work sometimes, but we're trying to keep it to the fun parts of the work, the things I'd be doing for any game night. So I think absolutely it's a risk. I think it's a risk for any content creator. You talked a little bit about you chasing the views, right? And how something you put a lot of effort in gets a lot of views, something you put, you don't put much effort in gets whatever. It doesn't always seem to pay off. Podcasting, I think, is a little different, and this probably isn't visible for most people. You might know this because you do YouTube and podcast, but I've noticed our podcast is pretty consistent. Like it's just been a consistent growth. I can see where some content is going to change the number of listens in a week, but it's not like a YouTube thing or something that's going to go viral, right? It's generally like, hey, we have a pretty steady group of listeners. But, some episodes, okay, a lot of people don't want to listen about an old game. So we might drop 100 listens in a week. Right. And then the hot new game might get a couple hundred listens, right? So we can see little spikes and valleys and peaks. But for the most part, we've got a consistent listenership that's slowly growing. And so we can kind of just put out the content we want. And I think as long as we're not pushing listeners away generally, we don't really feel that. Although, like, I've been watching our podcast grow, and I do pay attention. I check it a couple times a day to see how the numbers are doing this week, probably more than I should. And over the Christmas holiday, I noticed that, wow, listens are down this week. And I just started to, like, really feel bad. Like, people don't like our show anymore. What did we do? Why are people losing interest? And then right after the holidays, it spiked way back up again. We caught all those listens that were gone over the holidays because,
people were busy.
Just not commuting. They were busy. They were with their family, normal stuff. So I can feel it, and I'm glad we're not in a format where I would experience it more than we do.
Do you look outside of podcasts or outside of board gaming podcasts for inspiration? Like, I find that in my own work, I often am trying to reference things that I want to accomplish within the world of board gaming, but that's outside currently. And maybe that's not like a totally original thing, but, like if I'm watching Good Eats or something, I'm like, God, Alton Brown really revolutionized this. Why don't I do sock puppets in my Spirit Island video? Or, like if I'm trying to sound smart in an interview, I'm like, man, well, if only I could talk more like, X, Y, or Z. Not that I'm trying to ape them, but the types of conversations that are going on, or the types of podcasts, or the types of videos that I see outside of this sphere, seeing if I can use that to kind of hone my skills within it.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. And I do to some extent, right? Because I love this hobby so much, and I decided to make a podcast because I was enjoying podcasts. And although I don't have as much time to listen to as many anymore, I think when I do have free time, I'm generally, following content in our hobby anyway. So I'm not spending as much, probably to a fault. I used to enjoy a lot of outside things that I just don't spend much time with anymore. And I'm definitely missing out on a bigger worldview because of that. But
let's derail this. What are 3 of your non-gaming related hobbies? Give it to me right now.
3 so running, which we've talked about a little bit in the past.
Yep, we're both runners.
Running.
One of us looks like a runner. I'm not going to divulge which one looks like a runner, but we both like running.
You're bragging, I get it. So my other board game related hobbies. And see, that's interesting, right? Because I don't feel like a very interesting person because I've lost a lot of my old hobbies. Now, I still do love cinema, right? Okay. That's something I had a big passion for in the past. But in that way, I think I don't think I lost cinema or the interest in cinema as much because of it being taken over by the board game hobby. I think it's because I used it up. Like, I saw every movie that was on every top 100 list that existed. Mm-hmm. And now, of course, there's still good cinema being made. There's still good movies being made. But, I'm not finding as much evolutionary or exciting in that world. So I read a lot. I mean, I don't know. It's the normal stuff, Jack. I'm not that interesting of a guy. I follow politics. Probably more than I should.
Right.
So those are some things that I spend my free time with. That nothing that I get too deep in though.
That's interesting that you bring up cinema because that's something that I'm trying to become more versed in. It's something that I've always loved. Movies were one of those things that I was explaining earlier. The 1977 Hobbit wasn't my dad's thing. Mm-hmm. Well, a lot of me became focused on sci-fi and fantasy, much to my dad's dismay. But the one thing that we could connect on is the latest John Woo movie or something. Like we go see Face Off together, and I go see Gladiator together. We go see movies together. And so I grew up loving movies. And recently, my wife and I have been doing these movie nights where we, are able to unilaterally pick a movie that we haven't seen. And so there's a lot of movies that we haven't seen, even the classics. People are like, oh my God, you've never seen X, Y, or Z. Well, there's a lot of movies out there. So yes, I finally saw Schindler's List or whatever. But what's great about it is that either of us can pick, tonight is my night. I am going to pick this movie, and you're along for the ride, and you're going to appreciate it too. And there's none of this like, well, do you want to watch this? I don't know. What do you want to watch? Yeah. I don't know. What do you want to watch? And I'm trying to become more rounded out in my view of cinema, but having that deliberate intention to set aside one night a week to watch some new movie, and that can be anything from last week was 1940s Grapes of Wrath adaptation to Kimmy, recent movie with Zoe Kravitz in it, to anything in between. Just trying to pick a movie that's interesting, and it both gives us something to do, but gives my wife and I something to reflect on over the coming week, which I think I'm having the inverse experience of you in some ways. I still love board games. Board games are really interesting to me. I've always loved board games since I had Hero Quest as a kid, and I've been into hobby gaming throughout my life. But I have played hundreds, thousands of board games at this point, and while it's still impressive to me, viewing with a critical lens cinema is something that's new and fresh and, you know, like intriguing. I'm learning so much about it. So that's interesting that you brought that up.
Yeah, I love it. I mean, I often wish that I could go back and, as with a fresh eye, go through that experience. I mean, I did a lot of that in my 20s and early 30s, and maybe, you know, it was great. I think it was a great experience to get exposed to these things, and it was very intentional. But now I missed it with the experience of being an older adult and the life experience that I think I could have gotten even more enjoyment out of some of those films, seeing them now. So I think it's great. What I would recommend you do, though, and it's awesome that you can pick any movie. What I find myself doing if I don't set some kind of goal is fall back on comfort food. It's fun to watch a Marvel movie. It's fun to watch the latest action movie. It's fun to watch a comedy, but it doesn't mean that you're going to get a groundbreaking or you know, really, truly, you know, an experience that's going to change your life.
Right.
Go to a top 100 list of all time and start working your way through it. Even if it's like every couple movies you watch. My dude.
My wife has the AFI Top 100. That's what she's working through right now. And then I am just hungry for different things. So my picks have ranged from kind of rounding out, well, I need to watch get all the Wes Andersons in there. But at the same time, I'm rotating in, what are some great foreign films? Okay, let's go to Akira Kurosawa, and let's pick some Truffaut and Hitchcock. You know, there are a couple of Hitchcocks that I haven't seen. I am going to some degree of comfort food in that I'm exposing myself to things that I already know, but I'm trying to be cognizant of, like, what are experiences I haven't had and try to rotate through all of those. So even if Wes Anderson is like, I know I'm going to love every single film of his that I put on as part of these movie nights, that might be every 10th movie I get to. And I keep a watch list of the movies that I'm watching, as well as the ones that I want to watch. And then I try to go, what is drastically different than the last 5 picks that I've picked here? Some movie that I've always wanted to watch. And, you know, that's how we rotate through, because I want something wild and I want something weird.
Yeah, sounds like a fun exploration. I wish I was right there on that journey with you. What's your favorite Wes Anderson film?
You know, I'm going to have to say, going for the dark horse contender here, Fantastic Mr. Fox.
Oh, it's wonderful. It's my number 2.
Grand Budapest Hotel is maybe tied right there. And being someone who has a close but also somewhat fraught relationship with brothers, you know, like Darjeeling Limited is incredible. But Fantastic Mr. Fox is the one that I continually come back to. It's the one that I probably quote the most in my house, but it's also the one that I think I most often think about. His speech about why he does what he does, and he's self-reflecting with the water in the background and thinking about how he needs to impress other people. The emphasis on what it means to be different, and then the wolf at the end. I think about those scenes all the time. Like, it's weird how applicable it is in my life. What's your favorite Wes Anderson movie?
Moonrise Kingdom is my number
it's so
one.
Good.
And then Fantastic Mr. Fox, and then the dark horse for me, what I think most people don't have a really, you know, great view of, but that's The Life Aquatic.
Oh, it's also so good.
Yeah, just the 3 movies that just charm me every time, that just bring so much joy to me. I was not a big fan, sadly, of the French Dispatch, the most recent film. Some good stuff in there, but it just dragged a little bit. But beyond that, I've totally loved all of his films.
Life Aquatic is so melancholy. All of his movies are melancholy, but that one in particular is just like, it hits different. That is, and the set, unbelievable. I mean, like, Grand Budapest Hotel is one of my all-time favorites, and of course he utilizes these incredibly intricate sets. But I think I haven't been so impressed by a set in a movie as I have with Life Aquatic. That was just...
Yeah, and the Life Aquatic, the music soundtrack is one of my favorite soundtracks of all time as well. Just a perfect hit throughout. A variety of different tones in there, but everything hits. Couple perfect David Bowie tracks used.
Yeah. You know, I was playing Caper Europe. Have you played the board game Caper Europe?
I haven't.
Okay, so it's by Keymaster Games, the makers of Parks. And the first thing that I thought when I pulled that game out was, oh my God, these people have played or have watched so much Wes Anderson. The insert for it is almost kind of like velvety. It has this 1960s European like spy chic aspect. Everything is meticulously twee. It is so Wes Anderson, but not in a like goofy parody way, but in a legitimate, loving way, and it extends beyond just the illustrations. It goes into, like I said, the insert, the components, and even some of the idiosyncrasies of how the game plays or communicates information is just like, okay, I know exactly tonally what they were trying to go for here.
You know, it's so funny. I think that's a great topic to talk about here when we're talking about movies or cinema in relation. I got into a little bit of a conversation, maybe a discussion with a listener on Twitter the other day, because we often talk about theme and production and how important it is to us. Now, I am more mechanically focused for sure, but I think you can't deny that having a great theme and having that brought through in the production, and it can be from the minute you open the box to what's in the rule book to every single component, elevates the experience.
Oh yeah.
And and he said, well, would you ever not watch a movie with a great script because of the production? And I was like, yes, it makes a huge difference.
It's part of the cohesive whole.
Exactly. Like a Wes Anderson film could still be a well-written film, a quirky, well-written film, but if you didn't also put Wes Anderson's vision for the production, for the style, it wouldn't be a Wes Anderson film, and it wouldn't have been as special as they are, right? And that's the same thing with game board production as well. Like you can do it, right? You can put a great package, and Keymaster is great at that. And some of these publishers, and I think it really honestly has to do with the people who are running these publishing companies and what their vision is. And some of them don't care. And some of their audience doesn't care. You can look at Aaliyah and Ravensburger in Germany, right? Well, their audience traditionally hasn't cared, and so they've never put a lot of effort and time into the quality of production. But look at Scythe by Stonemaier Games. Yeah, right. That game just elevated what board games could be, and it's still at the top because Jamie Stegmaier saw Jakob Brzezowski's artwork and said, I want to create a game in that world, and they brought that world into this game. And it's not Scythe because of the cool mechanics, and there's some in there. It's Scythe because it's this whole package of this amazing world and this amazing production with a fun gameplay on it as well.
I think that's one of the most frustrating things about the discussion in our hobby, and I think that this is evolving, but a lot of people are dismissive towards Euro games, mechanic first games, as being unthematic. And I think that's not necessarily true. Like, you can have abstractions. It's not like you have a warrior and they're literally swinging a sword. But then again, even in a mini game that you're rolling around, it's still an abstraction. It's still a little statue. It's not like they're actually swinging a sword. It's not thematic in the way that a video game is thematic. And I think about this a lot. Like, a good example to me is Lords of Waterdeep. It is a game that a lot of people are like, it's just a pasted on theme. It's a pasted theme because, it could be any city or it could be any set of different 4 occupations. But I disagree. The fact that it gives you a thematic context. Okay, you are a quest giver in a city. You're going to recruit these missions that are quests that you're going to send these warriors on or these adventurers on, and then you're going to collect the adventurers and then cast them out onto that and reap some sort of rewards because it was beneficial to you. That thematic explanation is also entirely appropriate as a mechanical explanation for the game too. And I think that's really the magic of a good board game. Like, it doesn't have to be beautiful. Beautiful is a big part of it. And I don't think that it has to be like a really deep theme, though that can be part of it. But I think when there is a way of helping the player intuitively understand what's supposed to happen mechanically based off of what that mechanic is representing thematically is incredible. And when that works out, you know, it absolutely elevates the game in the way that you're talking about.
Yeah, and I love your, you know, using Lords of Waterdeep as an example. And one of the things that Lords of Waterdeep uses as a mechanism is worker placement. And I think worker placement is a wonderfully thematic mechanism because you literally have a figure that is sending out to do a task. And then that task is producing something. And, you know, Agricola is another great example of that. And Lords of Waterdeep, you know, probably missed because of its era a little bit with some of the ways that it tried to represent that theme. I mean, cubes instead of figures made a big difference for a lot of people thematically, right?
Right.
And the fact that, you know, modern artwork today on those quest cards would have had the art, you know, a larger part of it, or would have made the text more readable on it. Because right now it's hard to be part of the story when you know, when it's just you know, a tiny text that you can't even read the you know, the flavor text on it and things like that. So I think Lords of Waterdeep, 100% agree with you, is a great thematic mechanical mix that could have been done better and would be if it was done today.
Absolutely.
So yeah, that's a great point of discussion on this topic.
I think that we are just calling out for Lords of Waterdeep revised edition. I mean, Hasbro, absolutely. You have screwed up enough at this point. Your salvation is in doing a revised edition of Lords of Waterdeep. I mean,
100%.
Come on, guys. You're leaving money on the table here. Well, man, I could be talking to you about this all day, but we do have to cut it at some point. So let's end this with, like, what's on the horizon? What can people expect over the next couple of months on the Board Game Hot Takes podcast? Do you have any previews of some games that you're really hoping to get on there? Or any special episodes or milestones?
The next episode we're going to be doing, I don't know exactly when this is going to release, so, you know, this may be before that episode. The next episode that I'm really excited about is going to be, we're going to cover 2 really hot new expansions. One that I know you've already talked about, which is the new expansion for Dune Imperium.
Oh yeah.
And so we're going to be covering that in one of our hot take reviews where we play the game and immediately talk about it. And the other is, you happen to have it behind you, but the new Tapestry expansion.
Oh geez, you're covering that? I wonder, you know, like yeah.
So I'm really excited about that. This was our first opportunity to get one of these hot, you know, kind of pre-release reviews. And so that episode's going to drop on, I think it's February 20. You probably know the date, but I think it's February 20 is the
embargo date.
Exactly. Well, I've never been part of an embargo, so I feel,
isn't it exciting?
I feel very special.
Yeah,
very exciting. So really excited to talk about both of those expansions. I haven't even played Immortality, the Dune Imperium one yet, and I've been dying to get that played, even though I have it here. So that's going to be special for me. Beyond that, we don't plan too far in advance. Our show tends to be like, what do we feel like playing this week and talking about? So that's about the only thing I got to talk about. I will say, I think our format could use some freshening up. And so I am hoping, I got to talk with my co-hosts about this, but I'm hoping to maybe put out a listener survey, get a sense for where we should improve things, get a sense for what we can enhance, what's working, what's not. So I think we have an opportunity to you know, we've got a well-worn format at this point that's been pretty consistent for 3 years with slight adjustments, and it's probably time to find out what we can really do to get people excited and freshen it up a little bit.
Sounds like a plan, man. Well, for everyone at home, you know how to get podcasts. You know how to find people. You can find Board Game Hot Takes on anywhere you want to get podcasts, and also follow them on Twitter because they put out a lot of information and are much better about engaging the audience than I am sometimes about this stuff. I see so many intriguing polls and looking for feedback. And last of all, make sure that you're going on to Board Game Geek. This is a podcast that deserves the Golden Geek nomination. So thanks so much for coming on to the show, Tim. This has been a blast.
Jack, thank you for having me. I loved being a part of it.
Can't wait till next time. All right, later, man.
So.